What kind of bozo starts his show live muted? This guy does. As some of my adoring fans say, sometimes it wouldn't be a live show without some sort of tech issue at the start. So here we are, Friday. Happy Friday, everyone. We're going to have a sip of tea. The title for this live show is Inaccurate. It says the live show with special guest Michael Drew. Alas, I messaged Michael and he let me know a minute ago that he has dental surgery, so he's not going to be able to be here. So I don't know. Usually, when guests cancel kind of last minute like that, I'm not sure if we'll do another. But my hopes that he's okay, and that's okay. You know, we roll with the punches and how it goes. And so today I'll do a bit of a impromptu live show. We'll see what topics come forward. It may be a shorter one, and it may be a longer one. You know, sometimes when I'm riffing on ideas, they start to like become something cool, and who knows. So. Let's start the show the way I often do, which is taking a look at the week, how it's been for me, and what I'm noticing. So, and let me get my notes here. So, the first thing I noticed is that these last couple of weeks have gone very quick, and the days have been quite full. You know, I've had, if I look at my calendar here, if I look at my calendar, I have had a number of days that started at 8 a.m. Typically, I start my day not until 10. I don't usually like to start my day until 10 because that gives me a lot of time in the morning to settle in, to get started, to do some writing, maybe go to the gym, all of that. But I've had a number of days starting at 8 a.m. and then going all the way through till like 5 p.m. So very, at least for me, very full days. And one of the things that I'm finding is really cool about that is that I'm not having an experience of feeling overwhelmed and taxed at the end of those days. So probably, if I had the exact same circumstances on my calendar 6 months to a year ago, so by circumstances, I mean the same appointments, the same conversations I'm going to have, all of that, the same stuff to do in the evening, then I probably would have felt very drained by the end of my days. And so I've been looking at that and distinguishing, what's distinct. And the first thing that I can see is that I've been turning a lot of my energy towards creating an experience of spaciousness in my life. So there's a whole bunch of ways that I've been doing this. I've been really intentionally setting aside video games, and I'm going to take a quick detour here. As a gamer, I love me video games. Setting aside video games at this point is a little easy for a few reasons. One, the main reason is because there's just nothing that I'm particularly inclined to play. There's no hot game where I'm like, oh man, I can't wait for that to come out. Whereas if Streets of Rogue 2, if you haven't played Streets of Rogue and you like roguelikes, you got to play that game. But whereas if Streets of Rogue 2 was released, this month, that might be more challenging for me because I've been waiting for that. I'm excited. It looks really cool. I want to play it. So it's a little easier to set aside video games because there's nothing kind of pulling in that direction, but there's a challenge to it at the same time because one of the things I use video games for is just to stimulate myself. When not necessarily because I feel a pull in that direction, but because I feel a resistance to a lack of stimulation. So it's the same thing on the surface. Oh, he's playing video games. What's the big deal? There's no big deal either way, but I'm making a distinction here between two particular ways of being from which I engage with the act of playing video games. One way of being is like passion, interest, etc. The other way of being is in managing over top of something I'm in resistance to. So it's an active state of resistance, ironically. And the way that looks is I'll play a game that, I'm not stoked by. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's sort of like doing a Sudoku a little bit. It gives my mind something to crunch on. Hey, Rocky, nice to see you, brother. But the game itself, I'm mostly playing it just to be playing the game. And so that one is harder to let go of because it's easy that there's nothing I'm eagerly pushing into right now. There's no games calling my attention. There's nothing that my intuition or my passion is pointing me towards. But the part of me that doesn't want to be with stillness or a lack of stimulation or spaciousness, I'm going to talk more on this in a sec. That part of me is more, it's harder to say no to that part. So nevertheless, I've been actively cultivating not leaning into that. I've not been drinking. That's part of a larger project that I've been taking on of just like really creating a clean space in my body. But that's also a way of letting go of stimulation. I find booze stimulating. You know, it tastes good. It's got an interesting taste. There's a little bit of poison in there. You know, that's got a bite to it, and it excites the nervous system or depresses the nervous system, as the case may be. But either way, it creates a state shift. It stimulates in some way. Ontologically, it stimulates, perhaps the best way to put this. Phenomenologically, not. Phenomenologically, it depresses the nervous system. But either way, ontologically, that's a source of stimulation. It's a shift away from the baseline. And whether you go up or whether you go down, that's stimulating something. It's some form of difference in terms of who you're being. So I've taken that off the table. I've been turning towards lower bandwidth forms of entertainment, or another way to put this would be lower bandwidth forms of consumption. So one of the things that I really like to do is I like to listen to podcasts. They're fascinating, they're stimulating, and the world is a wild place right now, going through some real breakdowns. And, I do know breakdowns are a necessary component of creating a breakthrough, but being in the breakdown sucks, usually. That's usually the case. And I find it interesting to listen to podcasts that look at what's happening in the world from a really sober, elevated place. Not ivory tower oblivious, but more just like if we pull away from the sort of caliente nature of the moment, the reactivity that we might feel, the fire, the need to like deliver outcry or to attack the people that are outcrying, or to get into all of that. If we set that aside and just look at, hey, like what's actually happening, I find it really fascinating to listen to people that have some pretty sober, deep thoughts about the state of the world and hear them talk about it. But that is fairly high bandwidth, because when I listen to that, it has my mind crunching and thinking, and it kind of points my thinking in a particular direction. And so instead of podcasts, I've just been putting on music, lower bandwidth form of input. Instead of TV, I've been turning towards reading books, lower bandwidth. When you read a book, the bandwidth incoming is lower, and consequently, what happens is there's more sort of generation that happens inside. So I have this working theory, and it's, can you hear Babe blending up a smoothie? She's blending up a smoothie. I think that's coming through the mic. I have this working theory that there's almost sort of like we could call it like 100% kind of set of scales, and your mind will generate like at 100% when there's no bandwidth coming in, and when you have like completely saturated experience coming into yourself, then your generation goes way down. So television and video games are very immersive, especially these days, and as a result, that lowers our internal state. It has it generate less. Books tend to give you they give you the words, the descriptor, but it doesn't give you the picture. So it fills in less of the image, and consequently your brain has more work to do internally. There's more to generate internally. So by lowering that incoming bandwidth, I actually allow the internal state to do more generating. So I've been taking this on for a bunch of reasons, but the biggest one is just because going into the holidays, I started to feel that, I've been sitting in a state of restless, what's the way to best put it? Kind of restless boredom and disillusionment, and a lack of inspiration was really alive for me. And so when I'm faced with a lack of inspiration, usually the knee-jerk reaction is to point myself towards something stimulating, like find the inspiration out there. But what I felt really called to do was simply like just lower the bandwidth, just really sit in some space, then allow some spaciousness. That's not the right answer. That's not, oh, got it. He did that. Therefore, I should do that. That's the answer out. That's just what my intuition, when I got really quiet, was like inviting me towards. So that's been a big part of my practice lately. And what that does is it creates way more spaciousness. Now, watch this. I'm going to stick this landing. I'm going to talk about that schedule thing that we left off. You probably were like, this dum dum is completely digressed, like he's doing right now. And he's no way is he going to talk. I just let go of the schedule. Nope. Adam caught that thread. So where we jumped off from this was I was sharing that I had these full days, but I noticed that my experience at the end of the day is not, it's not feeling run down. It's not feeling overloaded. I actually feel quite alive at the end of my days. And I attribute that to this spaciousness I'm creating. I've been creating a lot of space around me in my field, if you like, internally. And so there is a lot of energy that is being generated inside of me. And so it's been really cool. I noticed my weeks are moving pretty quick. I noticed that my calls with clients or with people or, whatever I'm doing during the day has a lot of like energy imbued in it. I don't feel, it's not that I never feel tired or anything like that. I have those moments too, but the overall experience of myself, whether I'm feeling in any particular moment alive or awake or tired or physically exhausted or whatever, my underlying experience through it all has been really empowered, really generative. So that's been pretty friggin' cool. Been a pretty good week, pretty good couple of weeks from that point of view. Some other things I've been doing, just so you have a sense of like what my own practices have looked like. I keep a active page called I'm Bored in my second brain, if you like. If you're curious about the concept of a second brain, you can read some of Tiago Fuerte. I think it's Tiago Fuerte. I saw him speak at World Domination Summit. I'm going to look him up for y'all. It's Tiago something. Tiago second. Oh, it's not Fuerte, but I want that to be his name. What is it? Building a second brain. Where are you, Tiago? Tiago. Oh, Forte. Tiago Forte. It's muy fuerte. So strong. Second brain, amazing concept that I'm a real proponent of. It's the idea like the brain's a great place to have ideas, but we need to offload those ideas. We can't store them. If we do, we get bogged down and then there's no creative space for our brain to continue to create ideas. So we want to offload. The simplest form of a second brain I see on my uncle, who I went to visit, who's like 80 something over the holidays in December. And still to this day, anytime you see him, he's got a notebook and a pen in his breast pocket right here. That's the simplest form of a second brain, right? Have an idea, write it down, and then your brain can let go of it because it's captured. Incredible, genius. So your second brain, don't fool yourself into thinking, I got to get like Rome. I got to get, Adam talks about all this stuff. I got to get all of this together so that I can do this. And you're immediately overwhelmed. And you're like, and you go back to just, no, get a notebook that you carry with you like a dorkwad in your breast pocket. Get a pen, put it in there, done. And then things can grow from there. So anytime I think we're building a new system, the thing that matters absolutely the most is minimizing friction. I'm going to take a note on that because we're going to talk more on that in a sec. Look at this, the brain's ideas popping off. Oh man, so many good ideas. Here, there, here. Feast upon these ideas. Okay, I'll calm down. So, other sort of things that this is how I got to talking about second brain. We'll come back to this. Let's make a note here, minimizing friction with new systems and habits. I keep a page in my second brain, which is just, I'm bored. And it's sort of like, here's a way to relate to boredom that is different and distinct from my old way of relating to boredom, which I'll talk about for a moment. There's Bay in the background. And 2, it's a list of projects, things I may want to take on when I notice that showing up. So it's kind of, that page has 2 purposes. One is phenomenological and the other is ontological. The phenomenological part is, I'm bored, what should I do? What is something I can do that's a little bit lower bandwidth or whatever? That's very circumstantial based. It's based in my doing. The ontological part of that page is, here's the old story about boredom. Boredom means that I'm not doing enough. Boredom means that I'm wasting the day. Boredom means that I'm not making this up. This is like my story about boredom. Boredom means that I'm wasting my Sunday and then I'm going to get to Monday and then I have a whole week of work. And then that Sunday was wasted when I could have been fill in the blank with nothing in particular. Could have been ... And then those dots never really get filled because it's just this idea that I could have been doing something better than what I ended up doing. So that's old story about boredom. New story about boredom. Boredom is the gate through which I must walk to create an experience of spaciousness in my life. Adam, do you want to have an experience of your life that is more spacious? Do you want to have an experience where you feel more generative, more creative? Do you want to have an experience where you can have more on your calendar, but you actually don't feel overwhelmed and taxed? Great. The cost of that is going to be you're going to have to walk through this path, this door that you relate to as boredom. Hopefully that makes sense. So the ontology there is creating a new frame of reference in which to hold that experience of boredom so I can start to be more empowered in it. Because if boredom from that old story represents I'm wasting my time, I'm not using my days valuable, I'm dying and I need to use all of my days as best as possible, blah, 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 blah. Then when I'm bored, I have to fill that time. I have to get busy. I have to fill it. I have to get into something. And so the actions follow that underlying story. The story informs how I act, which then creates an experience, which then reinforces that underlying story. So I'm putting those two things on this page so that when I'm bored and I'm like, oh, I need to do something, I can come here and slow down. Like, oh, right, this is a product of this old story I have about this. What I want to do is I want to come over here. I want to create a shift in how I'm relating to boredom so that I can have this experience that I'm seeking to create. What tea? Hey, tea. I'm going to pour a little more while we're chatting here. I hope y'all are drinking tea. If you're not drinking tea this Friday, what the F are you doing? Okay, so that's boredom. And the last thing I want to share is, on this note, that does not always occur as boredom. Sometimes it occurs as restlessness. It occurs as this feeling that I should. I feel like I should be more productive. It's 4:30. I finished my work early. I got no emails. I should do something. So that often is like kind of how boredom, thanks Rocky, that's often how boredom shows up for me. It doesn't land in my head or make itself known as like, newsflash, you're bored. You should do stuff. It shows up more like, you need to go do emails or whatever. The other way it's shown up, and this one's more sneaky, is a sort of, okay, it's 6:30. I've had dinner. I've cleaned the dishes. I've done my chores. I got a whole evening in front of me and I don't know what to do. I should go and do some more work on that project. And so now I'm not playing video games as a way of stimulating myself, but I'm still, that's an attempt, I can distinguish this. This is an attempt internally to create some stimulation for myself. I'm not sitting quietly, letting myself sit in this restless feeling until it starts to dissipate, and then letting whatever comes next guide me towards what there is to do. Remember last week we talked about this idea of leadership being about being able to hold tension without collapsing it. So this is one of those moments where the tension for me is feeling restless, feeling bored, and then not being able to sit with the tension of that feeling, that tension it creates in me. There's something I should be doing. This is a waste of time. All of that is the tension. And by going and being productive or playing video games, I collapse that tension. I no longer have to hold that open. I don't have to sit in the discomfort that my restlessness and all the stories I have about being restless creates. And so the work in these moments is really, it's not that going and doing work at 6:30 at night when I got some spare time is wrong. It's more that we're looking at who I'm being that is then guiding why I'm going and doing that work. And in the instance I'm distinguishing here for you, what's happening is that it's not that I slow down and then what comes forward is like, hey, you know what would be kind of cool right now is you got some time, let's get that project moving forward. It's before any of that happens, restless feeling, go do work. And then I'm doing work. I'm no longer feeling, I don't have to be with my restlessness. So I'm kind of, I'm in this practice of doing what some divine intimacy practitioners would call holding fire. I'm holding the fire of that part of me that's like, restlessness, go do something, hurry up. I'm just allowing myself to sit with it. Sit and meditate, sit quietly, sit on the couch with my arms out, relaxing, looking around my room, letting my thoughts drift, and then letting the next action spring forward from there. When people come to me and they say that they want to be guided more by their intuition, this is not what they want to do. They've got all this noise and their intuition shouts at them like, stop doing that, start doing this. That's the hope. But my experience is that, at least for people geared the way I am, this is how we learn to find our intuition. We have to slow first. We have to create what we would call a clearing in which our intuition can be heard. The intuition is always talking to us, but we have to create a clearing in which we're willing to trust it, in which we're willing to allow the spaciousness in which it can be heard. And we have to create a clearing in which we're willing to sit with whatever discomfort comes as we create the space and allow it to come forward. And often part of what that discomfort is the belief like nothing's going to come. What if I just spend 8 hours tonight sitting here, Adam, you dickwad? That's you saying that to me, rudely, might I add. And that's the thing that stops us. We're like, what if I waste, so what if you did? What if you spent 8 hours? I'll let you off the hook. Adam, I'll interview myself. Adam, what if you spent 8 hours this Sunday just sitting on the couch and nothing happened? It would be a waste of my Sunday. Oh my God. And then I go to Monday and I haven't gotten to relax and I haven't got the experience of peace and I didn't get enough done. And you know what's hilarious? When I do a bunch of stuff to fill the space, that is exactly the feeling that I have when I go to bed Sunday night. When I fill my Sunday playing video games, I'm tired. My system is tired, but I don't have this experience of accomplishment or of actually feeling rested from my weekend or anything like that. Your mileage may vary, but that's what my mileage looks like. So that's been huge. That's been a really big practice that is continuing to deepen and unfold for me right now. And that's not an answer, it's not a finalized state. It's not like, he solved it. Well done, Adam. I'll forget this. I will hold this practice until I expand into this next stage of growth for me, this breakthrough that's unfolding for me right now. And then there'll come a period where I'll be guided towards like higher states of stimulation by my intuition. My system will just be like, you know what, actually, this new game's coming out and I'm ready. I'm ready for that. And then I'll find myself in that state and then I'll forget, I'll do that for a while until I'll no longer be doing that because of the rewarding experience. I'll be doing it again because I don't want to feel disstimulated, to feel restless. And then I'll have to rediscover this. So that's the way these cycles go. We remember and then we forget, and then we remember and we forget. And the beauty is that our period between forgetting and remembering becomes shorter as time goes on, but it still happens. And one of my teachers shared with me, I love the way she worded this. She said, forgetting is so beautiful because remembering is so beautiful. When we have these discoveries, it's such a beautiful experience, and we don't get to have these unless we forget. So we kind of have to, it's a bit of a mind trick maybe, but we have to like really embrace that part of ourselves. Like, it's actually beautiful that I forget this stuff. The game is not about set it and forget it. Ronco, I'm dating myself here, but I don't care. Ron Popeil's turkey basting product, you set it and forget it. That's not how transformation works. We create it, we forget it, and then we remember it, and then we have all the judgment and all of that stuff, and then we rediscover it, we reset it at ongoing. Okay, so that's spaciousness, that's alive. We have an open door, which is minimizing friction. Set aside those gross jokes I was just about to make. Well done, Adam. You stayed appropriate. So, I find that when I am trying to create a new system, two things are alive. The first is that my mind wants to make it the perfect, most fantastic system that captures every possible you know, way that it could go. It's like the world's greatest flowchart. And I spend 7 weeks setting that up, and then I use it for a week, and it's impossible, and it's got too many things to keep track of, and then I just stop using it. I'm talking about any system you have, like a system for capturing ideas, a system for remembering your chores, a system for managing a to-do list. And what I find is most powerful when we're trying to create a structure that supports learning something new. So if you're already doing something with a lot of reliability, this is less important. What I'm talking about here is a situation where you are seeking to adopt a new habit, a new way of being. Maybe you're trying to notice something that lies in your subconscious. You know, maybe you've been on live shows like this. Maybe you've listened to the podcast. Maybe you've read my book and you're like, yeah, I want to notice that. So that's an example where you're trying to step into something new, net new. I find that the most important, this is the number one thing that matters for whatever system we put in place, is that it is of minimal friction. So when I say minimal friction, I mean it requires almost no effort for us to begin to use. So here are some really minimal ways that you can create friction, or here are some minimal friction ways to create structure in your life. Number one, super easy. You've got this iPhone, if you're an iPhone user, and if you're an Android, you have some other weird system that I don't know, that I've got probably judgment about. You hold this thumb button down right here, which brings up Siri. Whoop, there's Siri. And then you say to it, remind me on this date at this time to do this. That is minimal friction, right? All you have to do is remember to push the thumb button and then say those words. That is an ideal system because it requires very little of you. If your system requires opening up your phone, waiting for the Face ID, and then finding where's notepads. Oh shit, I got distracted by email. Okay, I pulled out of email, notepads. Okay, which note do I keep? There's the note. Okay, so much friction. And any friction at all is going to really sabotage your attempt to step into something new. Stepping into something new it's best related to kind of like a delicate bird. You know, you don't want to disturb it. When you have a moment where you're witnessing yourself doing something that up until now has been in your subconscious, that's very precious. And so we want to create systems that allow us to work with that with a minimal amount of friction. So one example of this is I've been looking at how I eat as of lately. And because y'all know your man Adam, he likes candy and ice cream and stuff. And that's fine. It's important that I have that. But I wanted to create some kind of system for myself that worked with snacking and stuff like that. And I've worked with nutrition. I'm not overweight by any sense of the word, but I was carrying some extra weight and I wanted to lean up a little bit. I want to get that hot revenge bod for the summer that's coming. I'm about smoking hot revenge bod that'll make whoever. Anyhow, I don't need to keep furthering this joke. Still want that hot revenge bod. We all want the hot revenge body. Fuck you. You split up with me. Look at how hot I am now. And just resist making that joke another 10 minutes long, Adam. So the thing is, historically, I've worked with nutritionists and they're like, okay, here's the thing, here's the system, here's use this app to track everything you eat. Oh my God, it's exhausting. I don't want to sit down at every meal and track my macros. I don't want to estimate what did I put into this spaghetti that I made? I don't want to do any of that. It's tiresome. It's tedious. It's not innate for me. And there's zero joy in doing that. Now, credit to you if this is something that does. Like for some people, that level of sort of like tracking and stuff actually inspires something. So I don't want to suggest that for other people, this isn't the case. Further, historically, what I've done is like, okay, what's an empowering way I can hold this thing? And so that I at least had like a story to live into about tracking, okay, I'm tracking, I'm putting energy into. But there's been this point lately where I'm just like, I don't want to do that at all. Like, surely there's other ways. And so what is the most minimized frictionless way that I can work to eat a little healthier, to be a little more cognizant of snacking? And so what I did for this was I went to Chat GPT and I was like, look, here's what you're supposed to do. Fuck that. I don't like that. And it doesn't work for me. And I don't want to do that. I need a minimal friction approach. And so the suggestion was eat protein as a snack first, period. That's it. So if you're feeling snackish, eat a source of protein. Eat some beef jerky, eat a little bit of yogurt, something like that, and then wait a little bit and then see where that leaves you. So that's an example of a system that's minimal friction. It's there's nothing I have to hold in my head. I don't have to track anything other than my own hunger. Feeling a bit hungry. Okay, let's have some protein. Let's wait a little bit and then let's see where that takes me. So you don't need to use AI for this, and I recommend you don't, for like a lot of reasons. That's not to say I recommend you never use AI. I think AI is an absolute important place to work. The thing to take away from this is to look at the places where you are trying to shift an underlying way of being and experience for yourself something new, and look at your systems that you have in place to support that. If your system is like, okay, I'm going to do my best to remember, that's a terrible system, as an aside. Anytime we're working to bring something that heretofore was unconscious into our consciousness, willpower and memory are not, that is setting yourself up. It's fooling yourself. It's like saying, okay, up until this point, I've never ever seen this. So what I'm going to try to do is see it. That's not how it works. You got to put something in place. So one, make sure you have some kind of system. And then two, if you're finding, this really isn't working, how could you make that system a little less frictionless? Set a timer on your phone. Set an appointment on your calendar that reminds you just, hey, how you're doing. You know, usually when I start to work with leaders and we start to look at the level of being, that requires them to look at something up until this point in their life they've never had to look at, which is not what they're doing or what they did or anything like that, not what they said, but who were you being underneath that? So that requires training a new lens through which they've never looked before. And so one of the systems we set up is just a like either a lock screen on their phone or a reminder or a calendar appointment. And all it says is, hey, in the last 30 minutes, how are you being? And what that does is it starts to train this new lens. It has us practice looking for something new. Until we look for something new, we will not see it. And unless we create some kind of reminder to invite us to look for something new, we're not going to think to do it because our system is all set up based on how we used to look, the lens we used to look through. So that's the game. Rocky, what do you got here? Easier to have a hot revenge guitar. Oh yeah, that hot, smoking hot revenge guitar riff. Got that sweet revenge guitar riff. I don't need a revenge body. So to summarize this, practice minimizing friction in your systems. Look for places where there is a lot asked of you and ask yourself, how could I minimize this without sacrificing the depth, without sacrificing the intention? If you're sort of trying to create the perfect weekly review, sometimes it's better just to make it really simple as a starting point. We can always add complexity afterwards, but when we're trying to establish a new habit, it's best to start very small and just something regularly. I remember I was in a coaching mastermind thing, and one of the people was talking about like how he learned to floss. And he was creating, he was like, you know, the practice required that I like every night actually floss my teeth, but that was too much. So instead, what I did was every night I had to touch the floss. If nothing else, I had to touch the floss. And I thought, what, that's stupid. That's what I thought. I was like, man, we should look into this ontologically, blah, blah, blah. Who are you being about floss? But in hindsight, looking now, I think there's some real wisdom to what he was putting forward, which is to say, like, what that does is it establishes a habit every night that you think about flossing, so that flossing enters your consciousness. And if you've never flossed before, wow, our viewers just jumped from like 2 to 7. People want content about flossing. All right, noted. Making a note for future episodes. Um, it had flossing enter his mind every single night, and it had him create proximity to it. So if that's all that happens, then the patterns, then this practice isn't actually going to serve him to create what he wants, because ultimately he wants to start flossing his teeth. But this is a great place to start. And when people struggle to save money, I think this is a great place to start too. Like, start saving anything every month, something, $5. Set aside $5 every month. Oh, but that's not enough. And like, it's not going to lead to my retirement, and I can't rely on that. Therefore, I have to do much more. Yeah, but it's going to start you in your process. And almost always when we're creating deep transformational, like bedrock level change in someone's leadership, when we're supporting you to create an entirely different experience of your life where new things are possible, we support you to see the impact of how all that would happen and like how big these sort of shifts can be. And then we support you to take the smallest step possible, because it's at the smallest step that the wheels can begin to turn. And then once you're taking those small steps, we start to have you take bigger steps and bigger steps until before you know it, you're like, holy crap, things seem different. My, like me, my week is fuller than ever, and yet I feel more energized and excited, and my live show is better than it's ever been. Weird. That's the sort of thing to do. So look to minimize, create opportunities to build systems, patterns, whatever, that minimize friction and allow you to start doing something towards that new thing. Let's see here. Leadership. Oh, and creating results versus creating and clearing. That's neat. These are two other topics that have been alive for me. As some of you know, I'm doing a lot of thinking, what am I doing with the spaciousness? Where is my creativity inviting me to look? First, it's inviting me to look at this teapot right here and to pour some of this tea into this mug. Let me tell you what. I'll tell you what. This is a complete aside. I like to be silly on this mic. It's the best part about having a mic. Yeah. And I remember years ago, someone had reached out to me, I think because someone had sent them to my podcast, or he'd watched one of the live show episodes, and he was like, yeah, I checked out your live show and I really liked some of what you said, and some of what you said really made me uncomfortable. I was like, oh, cool. That's a sweet spot. That's what we're looking for, is that you gel. That was me combining gel and jam. You gel on some of the stuff that I say, and other stuff is unsettling for you. I want some of this. If none of this unsettles anything for you, we're probably not having an impact, because your world is consistent and coherent. And so if any of this is going to have an impact that will make a difference, it will need to be unsettling on some level. So when someone says, I found it uncomfortable, right on. This work, this conversation is making a difference for this person. It's moving something. It's forcing them to query something in their life that heretofore, wow, second time I'm using that word today, third time coming, heretofore was safe and settled and handled. Remember that if we're going to have a breakthrough, it has to be preceded by a breakdown. And breakdown, they are led by being unsettled, by shifting the ground. So anyhow, we got on the phone and I was like, oh, cool. So yeah, thanks for sharing what you did. I love that some of it resonated, and I love that some of it was kind of unsettling and made you uncomfortable. Like, what made you uncomfortable? And his response was, he was like, oh yeah, well, you were like, on the episode, you just broke out into singing Backstreet's Back by the Backstreet Boys. And I felt really awkward when you did that. I was like, oh, got it. So it wasn't that I was like dropping some incredible piece of wisdom that rocked this guy to his core. It's that I'm a moron sometimes and am willing to sing Backstreet Boys and sound stupid. So there it is. Okay. So let's take a simultaneous sip together. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. So one of the things that's been very alive for me is the topic on leadership. And here's what I notice about leadership. There's a few things. One, it's sorely lacking. There is not a lot of depth in the leadership conversation. There's not a lot of people that lead in a way that is deeply inspiring and potent. Two, everyone's got a take. Everyone believes they're good at leadership. This is like if you ask people if they're a good person, everyone's going to kind of be like more or less. I've not met a lot of people that when you get them in a moment of genuine reflection, they're like, yeah, I'm a sack of shit. You know, there are people that feel that way, but like generally people don't see themselves as villains. Three, so everyone thinks they're a good leader and everyone's got a hot take on how leadership should be because everyone believes they're a good leader. You know, it's that, yeah, more or less. Everyone will sort of qualify, this is blah, 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 but more or less I'm pretty good at leading. There's a place or two places or three places that I'm willing to consider that, you know, blah, blah, blah. And this is what I know about it and truth. And four, no one's really interested, given steps 2 and 3, in changing step 1. The concept of leadership is super saturated. It's lost its sex appeal. It's just become kind of meaningless to talk about. And so when you put, you know, if I sit down with a CEO or someone and they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, yeah, you know, executive transformational coaching, leadership, transformational leadership, their eyes glaze over. Oh yeah. I've heard it all before. Probably most of it. In part because this work's not about hearing it, but that's not the point. So anyhow, part of my exploration and research as of late with this spare time has been, you know, looking at this idea of leadership is just a word. It's just a concept, but what is the thing underneath it that we're yearning for? What is it that it makes available? What happens when someone develops the ability to lead more powerfully? And where and how is that missing in the world? So that I can speak below the surface of this word that is overused and oversaturated. Leadership at its core is about moving humans to a desired future. This is, by the way, this isn't the sexy. If I say that and you were like, wow, that didn't do anything for me. Great. That's how it goes. This is me sharing kind of my thinking and process as I'm working with this. But at its core, leadership is about developing the ability to move humans towards a desired future. And there's many different arenas in which that can happen. So I can practice leadership with myself. How do I move myself from this current experience of life and state to a new one? How do I create in myself the ability to change the way I experience finances? And then what happens from a changed experience about my finances? How do I shift my experience of life from one of scarcity to abundance? So anytime I take on the work of learning how to do that and creating a new experience there for myself, that's developing my leadership. You can practice leadership on more of like a level kind of like, you know, I really want to lead my son's soccer team to win the championships this year. Or I want to enroll my strata. I want to get them inspired by this idea of painting the outside of our place. I want to move us as a collective group of humans towards that future. And there's going to be stuff you're going to have to do to make that happen. You might be up against people's resistance. You might be up against the fact that it's easier to argue than it is to agree on a shared perspective. You may be up against the fact that people will tend to tell you what they don't want rather than aligning around what we do want and moving towards that. All of that stuff is part of the path in leadership. That particular example is a little more clear for a lot of us. We're like, yeah, all right, lead strata council, that makes sense. Third form of leadership is what a lot of people like me do professionally full-time for their careers, which is coaching. So when you are coaching another human, you are supporting that human to deepen their own leadership of self. You're helping that person become and embody more the being of leader in their life, aligned towards whatever it is they want to make happen. So this is where coaching and leadership are actually the same thing. Coaching's just an arena in which leadership is developed. It is not really distinct. I need to clean my glasses here. Got some fuzz on them. Plus, they're also hurting my ears. These headphones are great, but they push my eyeglasses tight against my head, and then I don't like that feeling. What are you going to do? So, and then there's sort of the form of leadership that we are more typically attuned to, or that fits our perspective more often. We could think of this as like the default perspective or vision or format or whatever on leadership, which is leadership of a company or an organization or a group of people. So I have 12 people underneath me, or I run a company of 50 people, or I'm running a company of 1,000 people. Clearly the domain of leadership. In truth, all of these, every single one of these is a domain of leadership. And every single one of them has its own unique challenges, as well as a broad general set of challenges that can be developed and that can go undeveloped. And at every single one of these levels, there's a bunch of stuff that we can do that kind of allows us to short circuit the long-term strategy of developing leadership. For example, if I to lead a company of like 1,000 people and to do so in a way that generates more leadership and has those people become more leaders and like really create something incredible, on some level, you could say for long-term health, that's going to require developing in myself the ability to cause more and do less, meaning I have a deeper impact, but by doing less myself and inspiring and enrolling other people to step forward and to learn how to do that. And then, so on and so forth. It requires that I inspire and enroll people in a possible future that is not yet created. It requires that I learn how to hold in me the tension that happens when I try to support other people to learn something new and confront the experience that they have as they're seeing failing at something they're trying to do, and all of that. So I have to do all of that stuff. I can short circuit that by paying people a lot of money. If I pay people a lot of money, more than anyone else, then people are going to stick around at my company because money is like really motivating. And then I don't really, if you can throw money at any solution, at any problem and kind of sort of solve it, which is what we're seeing. You could argue we're seeing the bankruptcy of that in the world right now. The world has become further and further fueled by money. Politics are more and more impacted by money. Companies do more and more with money, blah, blah, blah. This isn't to vilify money. It's important. Money is essential to how we operate as humans. That's a different conversation. But the point being that just like any tool, you can become over-reliant on it. And we're over-reliant on money as the solution. And you are doing this in your own life, I assert, because there's at least some kind of problem for which you were thinking, if only I had more money, right? Like maybe, I wish I had a house, but if only I had more money. I wish I had a deeper experience of abundance, if only I had more money. I wish that I could have more spaciousness in my life, but I have to work really hard so that I get enough money. And the reason that I can't take more spaciousness or create a deeper experience of spaciousness in my life is because I don't have enough money to then take the day off. So we all do this. And the thing is that trying to use money to address a problem like that, it doesn't address the problem. It's just like putting a Band-Aid over it. It allows it to kind of get pushed below the surface of our consciousness, and it creates a short-term solution to it. But long-term, that thing festers, which is why companies for which leadership is not developed the way we're describing here, and instead use money, just pay people the most, whatever, inevitably fall apart as time goes on. So this is kind of like the fundamental way that I'm starting to look at this. I'm trying to come up with like sexier ways to describe this. It's almost like a marketing or a branding. At the end of the day, it's a context exercise. I'm trying to create what is a powerful context in which to hold this work that I call leadership, but a powerful context to invite to set for other people's listening so that they can hear this through a lens other than when you say leadership, there's a context people hear with that. The context they hear is, yeah, I know about this. I'm pretty good at this. Yeah, everyone's got a take. This guy's probably not got anything particularly valuable. My own take is just as valuable as any, all of that. And so the moment you say the word leadership, that's what their listening becomes tuned for and towards. And then it's hard to have any conversations really going to make a difference. And so my research has been like, what is it that I'm about and that this work is about? What are we creating? What does that allow to happen in people? What does that make available? What's the cost of not engaging with that? That's the first step. And then how can I speak to that in a way that's succinct and that creates a new way for people to listen to what I have to provide them? not just me, right? But anyone that's involved in this sort of transformational work, how do we create a context that actually inspires them listening from a different place? Because then they can start to hear this differently than over here. So at its core, what that is setting context for people. That's an important leadership part. So I'm in my own practice. If you rise up through the ranks, that starts to become like branding or marketing. Branding and marketing are different aspects of the capacity of a leader, like the leadership art or quality, to create a powerful context for people to listen into. That's what a good brand does. A good brand primes you. It sort of sets up your listening to hear a particular message or a particular product, which is a message, in a particular way. So that's all we're ever really doing as leaders. One of the things we're constantly doing is like, what is the default listening that people have for the thing I want to share with them? And how do I set them up to hear this differently? Because until I do, we can't have any conversation other than the way it typically goes. And here's how the typical leadership, leadership, there's that word again. Here's how that conversation typically goes. Probably not that much here for me, but maybe one or two new things. Leadership is about learning stuff and hearing new techniques, not about really developing myself. What's the new technique for me? And then what you're going to get is the new technique for you, as opposed to a context that's like, leadership is not at all about really learning skills. It's about deepening your capacity. In order to deepen your capacity, you have to start to discover the limits of your capacity, and you're going to be resistant to doing so. What we want to do is support you to walk through that so that you can start to notice the edges of your own ability to move humans towards a future, and then support you to stand in those so that you can hold a deeper possibility than other people around you. And that creates you as someone who's transformational by their very being, just by showing up onto any project. That's the game we want to play. So that's the context that I'm in the practice of like widening, holding, getting my hands around. Give a little bit of a sense of how the work looks on this side. Okay, we got one more topic left. So this is creating results versus creating the clearing in which results can show up. So this came, I think I've talked about this before, but this has been alive for me a fair bit lately. I was talking to a former client who was sharing some stuff that we were both like, interesting. That's kind of there. And this grew initially, this distinction a little bit came from one of my earliest coaches, a woman named Deb. Love you, Deb. Deb Roberson. And I could not stand Deb when she was coaching me. She was the first coach I was working with who was deeply transformational. She'd been trained in this lineage that I carry, bear, stand for. Really coaching as a function of developing our own being first and then supporting other people to widen their being, as opposed to coaching as a function of helping you do more stuff in your life, teaching you techniques, helping you become more organized, facilitative stuff. That's there, of course, but that's not really the prime focus. And in this program I was in, I was assigned a coach. And the way that I was assigned the coach, as I would describe it, is both coach and client have a breakthrough that they're seeking to create. So breakthrough might be in like presence, being fully present, being a presence in the room. But typically what's going to happen is that the coach and the client are coming at that breakthrough from the opposite poles. Breakthrough always works like this, where there's a dyad, a tension between two poles, and we try to find, it's an either or setup. We try to find like, what's the right place to be? And then the breakthrough is kind of transcendent of either of these two. So this is not what the case, a little harder for me to see with my coach, but as an abstract example here, imagine you have two people that are what's up for them to create next in their lives is a breakthrough in presence, being able to hold and own their space in the room. One person, how they've learned to be is to diminish themselves and be quiet as a mouse, even though they're super radiant. So they're like sort of off in the corner, pretending that they're nobody, but you're like, who's that superstar over there? What's the deal? That's weird. And the other person can't really be with their bigness in any way other than it takes up the whole room. So they show up in the space and there's no room for anyone else. And so when you have two people and in a support structure like this going towards the same breakthrough, the person who takes up all the space is going to find it infuriating how this person just won't step into the spotlight. And the person who just won't step into the spotlight is going to find it infuriating how arrogant and vain this person is that takes all the space up all the time. So that's how, in my telling of it, that's how coaches were assigned. Of course, you're going to have all of this annoying stuff. So this woman drove me nuts, not because there was something wrong with her. And I reached out to her after like 10 years, maybe last year or the year before, and just thanked her because I was going over old emails. Sometimes you search, and you're like, oh yeah, this email 13 years ago. I wonder what that was like. And I was struck by how like much grace she had for me in my process. And I wrote her to thank her for that and just to ask like, hey, what was your experience coaching me? And she said, well, you had it that you needed to create results. And I could see that what there was for you to do was become a clearing for results to show up, but I couldn't force you to see that. So I just had to hold the space while you kind of navigated that yourself and like love you as you bounced around and blah, blah, blah. So I want to talk about that particular context, because this is where a lot of coaching, it leads people astray, and a lot of leadership leads people astray. And we as humans get all kinds of messed up. So creating results is like, how do I make sure that at the end of this interview, they hire me? Or how do I make certain that this woman that I find attractive dates me and then says yes to me proposing to her? Or how do I make certain that my husband shows up the way? Every time I do like dating or husband, I really try to shift the genders, but then I'm always worried. I'm just putting this on loudspeaker. I'm worried that people will be like, well, why did the woman in your examples do this and the man got to do the? So just so you know, I'm cognizant of that. I'm just trying my best to create examples in the moment. Although I guess I could say husband, that doesn't have to be gender. That could be two men. Or maybe you're a lesbian couple who refer to each other as husband. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Where were we before? Right, clearing for results. How the result I need to make happen is that I need my husband to apologize to me more. That's being attached to a particular result. And that's what messes us up as humans. Being attached to a particular result is sort of it's asking a lot of the universe. It's sort of presupposing that you could control everything, that you could play God, that if you just showed up perfectly, there's only one way that things can happen. And so a couple of things happen. One, we tend to get attached to that, and then we get really unpleasant with ourselves, and we have a terrible experience, and we're like, this sucks. The other approach is we get resigned. So we kind of conclude, whenever people are forming a project, for example, that might be like, I want to find the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. I want to be in a I want my forever relationship. That's an amazing project. But people stop working on projects like that because they're like, it's impossible. There's no way I can plan this out. I can't, this depends on other people. And it's funny because people will then go and make a project about getting a job, a career that they really love. And they don't have that, sometimes it's one versus the other, but they don't have that same hang up. Both of those depend on other people. And the truth is, hold on. The truth is, any project you're trying to take on depends on other people. Even if you have a financial project, that probably depends on like the state of the market. It probably depends on you keeping your job. It probably depends on you having a partner that's a yes to whatever it is you see to do. And if not, it depends on you being able to have a conversation with blah, blah, blah. So throughout all of this, we don't exist in isolation. We're always working in tandem with the world beyond ourselves. That's part of why life is enjoyable. It's part of what makes life fun. If that wasn't the case, life would suck. It would be very eh. And so the nature of this is that the practice has to become about creating a clearing in which results can show up. How do I create myself as a space in which the result that I want to create can show up? That's different from how do I make a result happen? This distinction is not very well understood, and it's sort of it can sound almost like a little bit like woo woo, or what's that sort of the law of attraction, but when it's created sort of a little bit, well, woo woo, it when the law of attraction is made into something a little bit cheesy or like magical thinkingy, and that's not what I'm offering or suggesting here. But there is a distinction that's really important. So for example, in the deepest parts of this work, when we're looking at like, hey, I keep getting into jobs that my bosses are dicks. And the way that we typically look at that is like, how do I make sure I never get into a job again where my boss is a dick? And then all of the work that that person sort of takes on internally, especially when they're not working with a coach or not working with a good one or not getting support in their leadership in this area, becomes about like getting better and better and better at filtering people out and finding the right job. So that's a path about creating a particular result. It's an attachment to a particular result. Instead, the work that I find actually makes a difference in people's lives is, how do I become a clearing in which the job where I'm respected can show up? And that distinction in where you're looking does a lot. One, that second question, that second line of inquiry turns it inwards, because now we can start to ask questions like, well, how are you currently being a clearing for what is showing up? How are you being a space in which a boss that never respects you show up? How do you create that? How do you invite that? How do you meet the world in such a way that that's what you're getting consistently? And what do we need to move out of the way or shift such that a different form of boss, a different type of job can show up and be available to you? That's a less satisfying, in the short term, that's a less satisfying direction to look, because what we humans want to do is, look, here's the thing. The problem's you. It's not me. That's what we want to do. We want to fix you. I'm happy to lead up and to solve the problems of my boss and to solve the problems of the people out there. But they just won't listen. Exactly. And that's why we have to bring that inquiry inside of you. How are you being a clearing in which this shows up? This is one of those things that happens at every single level of leadership. It happens at your individual personal leadership when you're like, I want a job that, I'm respected and appreciated at. And it happens at like the highest levels of leadership where you're leading thousands of people. People keep showing up late to my meetings. How do I make sure everyone shows up on time? That is not a very powerful inquiry, because it's about changing the habits of other people. A more powerful place to look is, how are you being a clearing for the way people are showing up? How are you being such that this is the pattern of behavior that is being invited? And this is often one of the things I love about this idea of, how am I being a clearing for the result that's currently showing up and what needs to shift to create a different result showing up. This is also a great place to look when leaders want to create a different culture of their company. Oh, our culture sucks. Help me figure out what my culture is. Usually that's the first one. Help me figure out what our culture is. Great. Tell me about your life. Well, I work 7 days a week, but I love it. And I'd like to spend more time with my kids and my family, but it's pretty good and it's getting better. Okay, great. Here's what your culture is at work. Overwork with empowering of that overwork, and finding a reason to be okay with overworking, and then sort of wanting something different, but settling for things slightly incrementally getting better. That's the culture of your company. What? No, honestly, it's different. No, it's not. It's not. How we be is the clearing we are. And so when company owners, CEOs, VPs, whatever, want to really do cultural shifts, we have to look at them, because how they be is that clearing. Who we are showing up as in the world is a clearing for what happens. I keep having people that are narcissists showing up. How are you a clearing for that? How are you creating a clearing in which what is showing up is someone that spends a lot of time talking about themselves, rather than someone that listens to you, or someone for which, probably more empowered, would be, there's an equal amount of sharing about yourselves? This is a tough place to look, because it requires a willingness to be responsible for something that we are more comfortable with judging out there. And so turning that light inwards, there's a degree of humility to it that intellectually we are all willing to pay, but very few of us, we don't realize how much is in the way of that humility. we don't realize how hard it is. We don't have a lot of credit for humility, and we have almost too much credit for how humble we are able to be, because the act of the humility I'm talking about, it usually feels like shame. It usually feels like judgment of ourselves. It usually feels like giving up. It usually feels like letting other people off the hook when they shouldn't be. That's the experience of humility most of us are not really willing or able to walk through on our own. Well, that's why I have a job, to support people to do that with grace. Okay, how do we do, guys? I'm going to share briefly some of the notes I had for the show today, just because I think it might be interesting to hear my process as I go into guests. So one of the things that I'm doing as again, as we continue to build out the kind of guests we have on the Transformational Leader and aim to meet the people that are coming in, but create a different conversation. You know, it's a gift as I'm holding it that there's a lot of people wanting to be on this show now. That's really cool. And I can make that mean like whatever AI's just found me, or I've got enough episodes that there's, I don't, whatever. But I'm relating to that as a gift. Another part of my research and what's creatively inspiring me right now is, okay, great. How am I creating the context? How do I create the clearing for the kind of conversations we want to have given who are coming here? And so some of the, one of the places I'm really looking is what feels finished for these people. People send me a bio. Great. What feels kind of like it's resolved in this bio or in this person's website or whatever? What feels like it's handled? Because my experience is that the places where we feel we've got something handled once and for all, that's usually the place where there's something new to be discovered. That's a place where we're like, all right, I've done the work there. There's nothing more to see. What do people feel like they're a fervent supporter of? What do they feel like under no conditions would I ever stand for anything other than this? That's also an inflection point, because that is a place where there's rigidity. And the rigidity is almost certainly justified. People don't just adopt a rigid position because they're like, I don't know, I woke up and I thought I'd be rigid around this. I thought I would just insist that only making right turns at intersections is the way. I decided to make my identity based around that. It's looped into their identity. It's looped into all of that. But these are places that I'm practicing looking with people, with their consent, with their collaboration and partnership in these conversations, to open something up and to explore something that's probably fairly unexplored in them. In fact, to explore something for which not exploring it is probably quite justified. So when I look over what people send me, this is kind of some of the stuff I'm looking for. And the thing that we're aiming towards is it's the distinction between someone being inspired by something you did or said, and between that and someone seeing a possibility for themselves based on who you were being in the moment with me. That's what we're aiming towards. So anything about the past, anything about the future, any piece of teaching, that's all about something you said or did. And that's not really where of course it's going to come, right? But the aim is, who can we have you be in the moment that is going to ignite something inside of, the people that are listening. So that's what we're going for. Okay, well, thank you everyone for hanging out. I know that we said we'd have a guest, but all good. I like to talk, as you've noticed, and I got to do it a bunch today. So I hope you have an amazing weekend. I'm going to put in a quick plug here for the Forge, the intensive, and I'm going to offer you a distinction. So in these conversations, the thing that happens on these podcast episodes, these live shows, is that you become aware of a concept, of an intellectual construct or an ontological kind of distinction. You become aware of it intellectually, sort of like, oh, I can understand that there's a system at play that keeps me going a particular way. So you can understand here, maybe, whoa, attack my mic. You might understand, I'm getting Italian, I'm talking with my hands, or French Canadian, or whatever. You start to understand, oh, okay, I can see this concept that I might be creating a clearing for something I don't want. And then you go off, and at your best, you sort of try to maybe do some work with that construct, that concept, that distinction on your own. So that's what happens here. It's what happens on the podcast. It's what happens when you read my posts. Hopefully, you should subscribe to my newsletter if you don't already. And At the intensive, what we do is we help you actually see that construct happening live in the moment as it's running you. So that's the next layer of practice, is having this thing move from a place where it's a construct, it's a distinction, and you can kind of maybe sort of feel your way around it, and you might have a sense of seeing it from the inside out. At the intensive, we help you see it from the outside in, which is always going to be a much more powerful and often like a little more challenging to look at, because we'd rather just hang out in our own self-concept. Our self-concept's usually nice. So that's what happens at the intensive, is you get to actually see this for it in all of its totality. In the forge, which is the next deeper cut or one-on-one work, we support you to actually rewrite, to rewire, to recreate that construct. So at the highest level here, you can take away from this idea of like, wow, being a clearing for results instead of creating results. Adam's super smart. I mean, I hope you have that experience all the time with me, but like, oh, okay, I can kind of get that. I might look out for that. At the intensive, you're going to see that as it's happening. You're going to get a much better ability to see the whole shape of it. And then at the forge or one-on-one work, what happens is you actually get to rewire that so that you become a person. You get to practice and then become a person that creates in themselves a clearing for a particular kind of result to show up. And the second thing that happens in that deepest work is you also learn how to support other people to do that. So you become more of a leader of self and then better able to generate leadership in others. So go to evergrowthcoaching.com/the-intensive if you want to go to that next level, or the-forge if you really want to dive deeply into leadership and all of its glory. Have an amazing weekend. I'm going to go get a haircut though. I'm going to go and play pickleball, and then I'm going to have friends over and we're going to play Magic the Gathering. I know. Adam, how do you make it look so good? I don't know. I just play a lot of Magic the Gathering and pickleball. All right. Love y'all. Have an amazing weekend. Bye-bye.